Hi guys, so this video is going to go over an Excel assignment that I have posted on Canvas. So this is titled the crime file. So this crime file is a bunch of data, and it's so you can see at the top here it says the crime data from the FBI Uniform Crime Report, 1960 to 2012. Right. So we have a lot of data. So here we have the years listed, and we can scroll all the way down. Right, it goes all the way to 2012, and we also have the population of that year, and then violent crime totals, murder and non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, property crime total, burglary, larceny, theft, and motor vehicle theft. Right, so we have all this data, and it might seem overwhelming because we have a lot of numbers going on, right? So that's why it's always important to read what's going on in the data and get familiar, so that way you're not so overwhelmed, right? So we just have a bunch of information for each year, right? So each row corresponds to each year, right? So we can look over to the right, so you can see there are some things we're going to fill in, right? So if we look at part A, it says compute the rate of crime per 100,000 of the population for each category, right? So finding rates per 100,000 is pretty common, pretty popular. So before we looked at finding like birth rate in one of the worksheets. So birth rate we calculate that out of 100,000, right? So that's a pretty common scaling factor for talking about talking about things like crime rates. Or I was just talking to one of our colleagues in the health information technology, and also in that field they do a lot of rates per 100,000 people when they're doing some medical stats, right? All right. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to go split screen with the Excel file and OneNote, so I can jot down some notes and as we're trying to build these equations in Excel, right? So if you were doing a problem like this and you feel overwhelmed, remember we just need to build the formula smartly the first time, and then we can just drag it down, right? So having big data sets shouldn't be overwhelming to you, right? So right. All right. All right, so I want to think through putting in an Excel formula in the cell, L7, right? So I want to think about L7. So in this, I want violent crime rate, right? So what I want to do, right, and it says out of per 100,000 of the population, right? So what I want to do is violent crime over the population, right? And then, so this would be X, and then here we want this to be 100,000, right? So I'm just trying to think it through how I would do this by hand, right, if I didn't have Excel. So the violent crime rate number for 1960 is this value, right? Cell C7, right? So this would be cell C7, and the population is in cell B7, right? And this is equal to X over 100,000. So I want to solve this for X, right? So to solve for X, I would take 100,000 times cell C7 divided by B7, right? This is equal to X, right? So I have the general formula for what I want to put in cell L7. But what we need to think about is pulling this down and also to the right, right? If there are anything that we need to lock in. So the 100,000 number, I don't have to worry about that. So I just need to worry about C7 and B7. Do I want these to change or lock down, right? So C7 is the violent crime total. So when I pull down, I am going to want the row to change, right? I want that to change. And then when I pull right, I also want that column to change, because if you notice, the next one is murder and non-negligent manslaughter rate. And so these are in the same order, right? So violent crime total, murder, and non-negligent manslaughter, and then we have forcible rape, robbery, right? So you can double check, but all these variables are in the same order. So I want this the column to change when I pull right, right? So cell C7 is good, right? I don't need to fix that at all, right? So good to go. Now B7, when I pull down, I do want the population to follow down, right, for the year, but I do not want the column to change when I pull right, right? So when I pull right, I don't want the population to jump over to violent crime total and then the murder and so forth. So what I need to do is put a $sign in front of B, right, and that'll lock that in. So now if I fill in this formula into here, so equals 100,000 times C7, and then divided by B7, and we need to lock that in, right? And I can hit enter. Oh, it doesn't like me having a comma in the number 100,000, right? So we can just accept that, right? So we get this 160.86, right? And does it tell us the format? Let's see. So it does not tell us the format, but what I'm going to go ahead and format to 1 decimal place, right? Because that's a lot of digits to keep track of. So I right click on the cell, click format cells. I want to format this as a number. I want to use the comma separator, and I want, let's do just 1 decimal place, right? So I'll hit OK, and now that value is formatted, right? So I'm going to go ahead and make this, or no, I can just pull this over. I'll just pull this over. So now I can pull this to the right, and then I can actually just double click and that will pull all the way down, right? And probably what I would do, just to be sure we did this correctly, is let's just click on a random box and see if it's set up right. So to do this, we took 100,000 times G19, so G19 is aggravated assault rate, right? That's right. And then divided by the population for that year, right? So that looks good, right? So I'm convinced this looks good, right? I don't have any values that really stick out to me as like way too big or way too small. This seems right, right? So we're good there. So then now we're ready for part B. So it says compute the annual percent change for each crime rate and format as a decimal to 3 places, right? All right, so we want the calculate percent change, right? So if you think back a moment from the text, right, to find percent change, so percent change, you're going to take the total change and divide by the original amount, right? And how you get the total change is we take the new minus the original, right? And if it's a negative value, then that means it was a decrease, and if it's positive, it was an increase, right? A percent increase and percent decrease. So now I need to think through again how this will work. And notice the first row is white, right? And that's because we can't have percent change for the first year, right? But the second year that we have data for, we can calculate the percent change from the first year to the second year, right, and so forth. So that's why that's white. That should be blank, right? So again, I need to just build an Excel formula that's smart for this box. I can just pull to the right and down, because again, my variables are in order at the top, and that makes everything really nice, right? So if you were doing this for like your job, it's really helpful to keep the variables in the same order, right? So that way we can just cell reference and drag and drop, right? So maybe you would need to look at crime rates if you're working for some government agency that dealt with like criminal justice, or maybe you'd have to do something like this, but instead of like crime rates, maybe it's I don't know, instance on the job, or maybe this is a big a bunch of money in different accounts and so forth, right? So being able to do these kind of things in Excel is really, really powerful, right? Really useful. All right, so let's think about how to calculate this, right? So for the violent crime rate, what we would want to do to calculate this is we're trying to calculate the percent change of this, right? So what we'd want to do is take the new number, which is 158.1 minus 160.9, right? And then divide by the original number, which is 160.9, right? So that's how, if I were doing this by hand, that would be the calculations that I want to do, right? And if I was just entering this in as a formula, I would do equals, and then remember we talked about like order of operations. I'd want to put the numerator in parentheses, right? Oops. So 158.1 minus 160.9 divided by, and then 160.9, right? So if I'm doing this with cell referencing, right, the 158 number is in what, L8? So we would do parenthesis L8 minus what, L7, and then divided by L7, right? So that's the formula that I would want. And if we think about if we want these formulas to move, right, let's think about pulling it down one, right? So I'm going to enter this in, so equals, then do inside parentheses, whoops, hang on, there. So inside the parentheses, I'd want to put L8 minus L7, and then divide by L7. Oops, there, L7, right? So, and we were told to format this at 3 decimal places, right, in the direction. So I'm just going to go to Format Cells and go to Number, and we want 3 decimal places. Say OK. There. So now I have that at least this box correct, right? So let me pull this down one and see if my formula seems to work okay, right? So if I double click on this, would this be right? So if I want to find the percent change, I would take the new amount, right, which is 162.3 minus the old 158.1, and then divide by the old amount, the original 158.1. So that's correct, right? So it appears that I'm just pulling this down, it works, and it does, right? So that's good. So now think about pulling it right and see if that will calculate things the right way. Right, so to calculate this, we'd want to take the new murder rate and subtract the old murder rate, right? So M8 minus M7, good. And then divide by the original, which was M7. So that works, right, also, right? So I don't have to worry about locking in any cells, right? So I can just pull this to the right, and then I'll just double click there to bring it all the way down, right? So those are all calculated, right? Alright, so it would also make sense for me to go ahead and format these as a percent, actually, right? So let me highlight these and hit the percent button. Maybe do one more decimal place. There, right? So that actually, I think, looks a lot better, right? So it says compute the annual percent change for each crime rate format as decimals to 3 places. But I think showing it as percents is more powerful here, right? So either one would be okay with me in this case, right? Because this is a percent change, so it's okay to say as a percent. So So now part C says make a well-labeled line chart for the crime rates per 100,000 over the years given. Right? So we want to make a line graph for violent crimes. So the first thing I would do is highlight the data for the years, and then if we hold down control, whoops, so I zoomed in there, I didn't mean to do that. So if I hold down control, I can select this column also. Right, so you hold down the control key to keep selecting. So I selected the years, and then hold down control, select the violent crime rate, right? And then if we go to insert, we want a line graph, right? So that's here. So we can pick a line graph, see which one seems to look the best. Well, this doesn't seem to be grabbing the right right data. So let's do select data and see what's going on. So it's keeping two variables. So I don't want year as a variable, so I'm going to go to remove, right? And then for the horizontal category, this is where we want to go to edit, and then we want to select the years. There, so that works out, right? There, so I have that graph going on, right? So now I can see how these rates are changing, and these are per 100,000, right? And it's pretty obvious these are years, but you could go in and add that if you'd like, but you don't have to. It is labeling every other year, and that's perfectly fine, right? There's a lot of years there, so it would take a lot of room to label them all, right? All right, but that's how you could walk through this type of Excel assignment, right? So I hope this was helpful. Hang in there, guys. You guys are doing well. All right, thanks.